biggest, I went to a seminar for newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
This was 6 years ago or something like that, maybe 6 years ago. And newspapers are struggling, have been struggling for about
Oh
10
yeah, I know.
and they're trying to figure out what's going on. Well, at the time, the biggest thing they were trying to do was called native advertising, which I find, uh, if not blatantly unethical, at least morally ambiguous. So the idea of native advertising is that you try to place the ad in the environment that it's in such a way that it's indistinguishable from the environment that it's in. So in a newspaper, you would have an article that was written by a journalist, and it was actually a paid ad for something.
Oh,
It doesn't
I
look
got
and
you.
feel like a paid ad. And there have been different laws and different ethical suggestions and different things, and nobody's really come down on how to exactly differentiate those. But sometimes they say sponsored content. Sometimes they say this article is brought to you by Ford. Sometimes they say, sometimes there's a byline that includes the journalist that wrote it and the company that paid for it. Sometimes there's nothing, and it's just whatever. But I mean, the biggest part of journalism prior to 10, 15 years ago that it was huge was, they called it the Chinese wall, which might be a non-PC term now, but they called it the Chinese wall between advertising and journalism, is that the people that sold the ads didn't get to talk to the reporters.
Mm-hmm.
And that never the twain shall meet, and that the advertising would not, or in theory should not, affect what was written or how it was written. And I went to this conference, and they were actually, it was a newspaper that had turned things around, and they were making tons of money, and they were seeing growth in an economy where people were fleeing from printed material. And so there's all these newspapers from around the country coming to learn what they had done. And I'm sitting there. I was invited to be there because I teach communication.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there going, you guys are learning the wrong thing, because one of it was native advertising.
Wow.
And another thing was just basically stop doing news reporting and start doing memes. It was just fully buy into like pointless content, meme culture.
Oh.
And this newspaper had become exceptionally successful by metrics that don't matter, which I call vanity metrics. Mm-hmm. So they had become very successful in their vanity metrics, which they were able to leverage those vanity metrics to their advertisers, and the advertisers were buying it hook, line, and sinker on the vanity metrics, because this was back before Cambridge Analytica and stuff like that. And so you could segment an audience like you shouldn't be able to. You could segment an audience like you couldn't believe. And so anyway, it was fascinating to see this, and they were all trying to figure this out. And I'm like sitting there going, facts are important and journalism is important. And I understand that the current system that you guys are in, that you need to keep the doors open financially, but what you're doing is you are moving into trying to compete with YouTubers and Vine at the time and whatever. It's like, don't try to chase this trend. Like, you should adapt, and you should grow, and you should learn, but don't lower your journalistic integrity. Like, that's your competitive advantage. And in the marketplace of ideas, you have a term that says that you are authentic and to be trusted. And it's called journalistic integrity. If you sell that, for a mess of pottage or a couple bucks, you are going to lose out on the only reason that anybody would ever come to you, because other people are going to be significantly better at creating easily consumable, empty calorie content.
Unfortunately, I think we have an awful lot of that now, and it's hard to know who to trust or what to believe, and that bothers me all the time. But
I've heard it described as we have evolved from the information age to the disinformation age.
That's a good way of describing it. I don't know. I think I've heard that before. It might have been from you, but I think you're right. Um, and basically, whoever shares the same opinion you already have is the source you're going to trust.
Right.
And
You've got confirmation bias. All of us have confirmation bias. And so we look for the things that make us feel good and comfortable. Yeah, it's fascinating. I went to Adobe Max. This is a couple of years ago.
I would love to go to Adobe Max one year, but go on.
It's fun. It's fun. I don't want to say I'm a pessimist because I'm really actually quite optimistic, but when I think about tech or politics or humanity in general, I get a little bit
cautiously cynical, maybe, or cautiously.
I'm fairly cynical, but I try to be optimistic about things. I have hope. I think that's maybe I'm a hopeful pessimist. I don't know, but I go to Adobe Max, and every time they do sneaks, it's like, this is what we're working on behind the scenes. Okay, so they have all this different stuff. They have the Bash, and that's like this big party where they do stuff. They've got, they've got Premiere where or I can't remember what that one's called, but they've got the big showcase where they showcase all the new things that they're rolling out. And then they have sneaks, and sneaks is they basically are such a giant company that they can pay engineers to experiment. And so they just have these little pods of little software engineers that are like, I'm going to see what I can do if I can do this, right? And they play with stuff. And sneaks, they tell you what they're playing with. So a few years ago, I remember it was I can't remember if it was Key or Peel, but one of those guys. He was like the comedy relief. They always have some comedian to bounce ideas off of or whatever. And he was up there. And this guy, this like one of the nerdiest guys you'll ever see, gets up there and he's talking. He's obviously not a presenter. He's a software engineer. And he's like, yeah, we've figured out how to, if we have a minimum of 20 minutes of someone's voice, we can make them say anything in any tone. And
so he
That's
said, scary.
Yeah, he said, Mr. Peel, we've written a joke for you that you've never said because we have enough audio of your voice. And so they said, so they wrote this joke and then they had him say it. And so the software said it and it sounded exactly like him. And then he said, now we're going to say it. Now we're going to say the same thing, but we're going to make you angry as you're saying it. So then they went to the little slider and they slid angry over, and it sounded like him being angry. And they slid the other one over and it sounded like him being happy. And it's, they're dialing it in. They were typing, and it was live. It was live and it was immediate. And so I don't think it was instantaneous at the time. So I think there would be a delay if you tried to do it live. But they would type it in, take it half a second, and then it would spit it out.
I'm kind of scared.
Oh yeah, and they were all excited. They're like, "Hey, isn't this great?" And he goes, "How are you supposed to tell what's real and what's false anymore?" Like, he wasn't even cracking a joke. He was like, "This is terrifying," and it was you could tell it was the first time it had occurred to that software engineer that this would be a problem. And so then I got on Twitter, because they always have a hashtag. I got on Twitter and I said, in case anybody's wondering, Adobe just killed all audio evidence in court. I mean, they called it Photoshop for audio. And
wow.
It is indistinguishable. The file is indistinguishable.
So you can't even look at the waveform and tell the difference?
No.
Wow.
And so then they pretended like that didn't happen. They killed it. No,
I'm sorry. Once you open that Pandora's box, it's out there.
Oh yeah. And this last year, they released an initiative, which was basically to combat their own Frankenstein's monster that they created.
Adobe did?
Adobe did. Is they said we're not exactly sure how this is going to happen, but we are going to release a digital truth initiative to basically deep fakes, right? Because there are simple apps now where you can just take someone's face and map it on somebody else's face and whatever. And people are doing. There's been court cases on this where people will take an X and they'll do revenge porn, and they'll take their face and put it on an adult actress's face, and in a court of law, the court said that was not defamation of character because it was parody. So the law has not caught up to the technology yet, and it's a huge problem. But Adobe said that they are going to try to track every image and every audio file and every movie file on the internet back to its original source, and embed metadata into the files to tell when, who, and how, and what was changed and altered, so that you could basically, there would be a digital signature to know if it was the original photograph, or if it's been altered by Photoshop, or if it's been messed with, or the audio file is the original file, or whatever. And I don't know how you do that when there's like billions of videos, uploaded to YouTube every 5 seconds or whatever. I don't know what the stat is, but there's so much new content being created. I'm not sure how you do that, but yeah. And
what is the expression? You can't unsqueeze you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah.
Blockchain. I don't know what that is, but
blockchain is like, it's like cryptocurrency is based on blockchain. So it's basically a unique identifier that's extreme. I'm oversimplifying it because I don't really understand it, but it's a unique identifier that makes it extremely impossible to make a digital file be duplicated, basically. So wow. it would give you the ability to have a unique identifier on files and stuff. But I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the curtains that they'll make an announcement, and then that announcement, no one will ever mention it again. And then a couple of years later, you see the NSA has it now or something. Stuff like that happens pretty frequently. So anyway, I don't know. Why did I start talking about that?
I don't know. It's making me think of a lot of, I don't know, because I'm such a movie person. It's making me think of the movie The Circle, which was not a very good movie, with Tom Hanks and Emma Watson. I love both of them, but it wasn't a very good movie. But the book was pretty good by, I think it's Dave Eggers who wrote it. Worth reading. But it's basically talks about, and this was many years ago, and it talks about, it's basically a Google-like organization. And it's kind of scary what they can do and how much control they have. And the other thing, it makes me think of that one line from Jurassic Park, where Jeff Goldblum says, "You've been trying so hard to figure out whether you can do something. You haven't stopped to think about whether you really should."
Right.
You're trying to figure out if you could do something. You didn't stop to think about if you should.
Yeah. Frank is asking if we're talking about conspiracy theories. I'm not talking about conspiracy theories. I'm talking about things that I've actually seen with my own eyes that the tech companies have done.
Yeah, it's not that far out there, but these are all things that are clearly possible anyway. So yeah. If an evil genius gets it, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
an evil genius so much as just somebody with more money than most countries that lives in Northern California and runs a tech company.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff out there. I think it is going to get to the point where you don't need actors or actresses to be on set anymore.
Oh yeah, and they've been predicting that one for years. I don't know why I keep referring to movies, but I'm a movie person. There was a movie a long time ago with Albert Finney and Susan Day. Susan Day, do you remember who she is? You probably don't remember. I mean, The Partridge Family was way before your time. David Cassidy.
Yeah, I watched it. Though.
Susan Day played Laurie. And anyway, the movie was Susan Day and Albert Finney, and it was basically what they did is they mapped people and then they used them in advertising, and you didn't need actors and actresses anymore. You just used these digitally mapped, and this was years ago. I mean, this was, and they're saying that already. I have heard that already, that that they are that's possible even now. So
yeah, I mean, it's getting, I don't know. There's
a way to do deep fakes on a live Zoom call.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's gotten to the point where if you've got enough processing power, you can stiff really. So this is what I always tell everybody. I think it's not a stretch to say that this is going to continue to happen, that anything that can be automated will be automated, right? It's going to be there. If I can pay some cute actor or actress, $10 million for what they look like and act like and sound like one time, and then make an infinite number of movies with them, that's more efficient. It's more effective, than trying to get everybody's schedules together. So I'm sure people are working on that, right? Or if somebody dies in the middle of production, and we still need their character. We've seen that recently with the Star Wars. Not really done well, but I mean, 5-10 years from now, it'll look indistinguishable from the original.
We saw that in Star Wars. I knew we saw it in Star Trek.
Yeah, Carrie Fisher.
Carrie Fisher, of course. Yeah, I'm sorry.
And then,
God bless you, Carrie.
Moff Tarkin.
Moff Tarkin played Chewbacca? Who did Moff Tarkin play?
No, he was he was initially supposed to be he was initially supposed to be the villain, but everybody liked Darth Vader's outfit better.
Oh,
so that's actually how that happened. But he was the big actor. I can't remember his name. But anyway, so he was the big actor that was in the original Star Wars Episode 4. But he died, long since died. And so when they made the sequel trilogy, he was in it as a CG person. And it's pretty obvious. They still don't really have the teeth and the skin right, but they're close. But anyway, all of that things that robots can do are going to continue to become, more ubiquitous, more used, more efficient, more cost effective. And so I continue to see in the marketplace room for illustrators and animators and cartoonists and painters and photographers and people that are creating what humans need to be there for. And so if you can bring some humanity to your work, that's huge. It's really important.
Yeah.
It's because
that's a good point. Machine
learning is good at brute force attack on information. It takes a huge amount of information and it processes it. It's a pattern recognition machine,
mm-hmm.
but it's not a creator, right? And so it can mimic, it can recognize patterns and repeat, and it can recognize complex patterns and very, like being able to. You look at what happened with several of the things during and around Cambridge Analytica. Somebody was coming up with a camera basically that you could point at anyone, and it would tell you within like a 90-something% accuracy of their emotional state, because it could tell flush and skin color, and it could read facial expressions.
I've heard of this. Yes.
The intent of that was to augment people with autism and other people on the spectrum that were had difficulty or were unable to read facial expressions and social cues and things like that. And to basically tell them, this person is saying this in an angry way. This person is saying this in a happy way. This person is joking. This person is being sarcastic, which is awesome. Then it disappeared. Nobody heard of it again. And it got wrapped up into surveilling the people. So somebody bought it and started using it to surveil the populace.
Well, I would think it would be good for, I'm going to be silly now, but I wouldn't mind having a big Hero 6 nurse
Right.
hang out and tell me and be able to tell when I need a hug or I'm not feeling well
Yep.
and to yeah. Actually, I'm going to say something mean, but I've had a few doctors in my life that I would have been much happier with a big old robot than
Oh yeah.
but
Yeah. So anyway, I think if there's something that we can do that is human, it involves creativity and reason or nonlinear thinking or illogical thinking or out of the box thinking, design thinking, methodologies, things that come up with irrational connections, things like that. That's all stuff that computers and software and robots and everything, they might be able to do that eventually, but that is going to be way harder for them because they're in it in the pattern recognition and the brute force attack. I mean that's basically
mhm.
well, like an interesting thing that I saw this morning. So my son is 2.5. He's starting to piece together words into sentences, not full sentences, but he's getting there. Um, but he was
And
interesting because
ridiculously cute.
oh, he's
But
so cute. Yeah, he's a little Sesame Street monster. But he picked up this tube of baby lotion, and it had a line drawing of a baby on it. It doesn't look like a baby, right? But I know it's a baby because I'm an adult and I know what drawing is. But he's 2.5, and he looked at that and he said, "Baby." And to me, that's fascinating that humans are able to do that because computers can't do that, right? If you can't show a computer, a drawing of a cat if it has only seen like 2 images of cats and ask it what animal it is, it won't know because it
that's
needs.
why they use what is it? Don't they use images and stuff like that when they're trying to prove that you're not a robot? And they say, tell us which of these 6 images has a car in it and
Right,
things like that.
right, and it's because it takes a super AI that has been shown hundreds of thousands of images of everything and cataloged it and checked it and cross-checked it and seen things at different angles and watched video of those things and analyzed it and been told. And if it miscategorizes any of those things early on, then it learns the wrong thing.
Right.
But if they learn the correct thing, then they can start to identify stuff. But it's because they've recognized a pattern. But humans don't learn the same way that AI learn. Humans don't learn by brute force. We don't learn by watching hundreds. I mean, my son has only met 2 cats, right? They live in our house. Mm-hmm. He knows 2 cats, but he can see a cat that looks nothing like our 2 cats and know that it's a cat. Because we make inferences and we make logical leaps and we make rationalizations and justifications in our thinking that helps us to connect things that are unconnected. And that's a different way of thinking than software does. Mm-hmm. So if you can take that type of humanity and put it into your work, whether that be music or art or whatever it is, I think you're going to be better off than doing something that can be easily programmed or doing something that's why in my teaching, I struggle so much when students want me to give them the step-by-step process. As I said, hey, listen, if I can easily put this in 17 steps, then it's pointless for you to know because a computer will be doing it soon. Why would you bother learning it? I want you to think, use the tools and come up with something that nobody's thought of before, or a new way of doing something old, like think and rationalize and create and do something interesting, because there is no room in the marketplace for instruction followers, because sets of instructions, that's just one step away from being code.
So, yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true.
So I don't know when the system is going to catch up with financial compensation, but creatives are where it's at, man. I mean, that's the future of humanity, because without that, there is no humanity. We will just easily be replaced.
Oh, well, yeah, that is true. Yeah, yeah, that's true. cool. That's the one thing. That's the one good thing about the whole thing, because I feel like when I was in high school, I read a bunch as part of an English class. We read Fahrenheit 451, Brave New World, 1984. Um, I've forgotten what else we read, but just about every dystopian novel I've ever read, and I don't read them anymore. They scare me too much. At least a certain aspect of it has come true. Now
Right.
we're still alive. We're still moving forward, but it's all happening. And,
Go read how they describe the political discourse in 1984.
I have yet to read it again, because when I read it in high school, I remember enough of it that I know that so much of it is happening, has been happening. And actually, Animal Farm was even harder. And I read Animal Farm in 6th grade.
Yeah.
And when I read Animal Farm, I remember thinking, well, this would never happen.
Right.
And it's actually, I think Animal Farm is closer to a lot of the things that have been happening to us. So,
Oh yeah. And then you think of like the Matrix in the 90s.
mm-hmm.
It's like humans becoming batteries for the machines to take over. That'll never happen. And then nowadays I'm like, I don't know that we're a good source of energy, but I can totally see the machines taking over.
Mm-hmm.
And we're willing them to do it. We're like, yes, augment my reality. Go ahead.
Well,
like
even
classes where you change what I see.
even and I think we're both Marvel geeks.
Yeah.
I know I am, and I know you are. Didn't want to call you a geek, but
You tell me.
and there's that one scene in Captain America, the Winter Soldier, which is probably one of my favorite of all the movies. And when they're talking to when they're in the bunker, and they're talking to the artificial intelligence that was the Professor Guy, who was Swiss, and he talks about how we take your freedom away from you, and you're going to fight. But if we make the world so chaotic and you willingly give away your freedom, that's another story.
Yep.
And in a lot of ways, we're doing that.
Oh, yeah.
And I am as guilty of it as just about anybody. But
we all are. I mean, think about Google Maps.
Oh, good Lord.
Google Maps is fascinating.
It's
fascinating because it is one of the most invasive breaches of public trust and the ability to have privacy. You should not be able to see whether I mow my lawn or not from your computer unless you are like at my house in my neighborhood. You know what I mean? But I remember I bought a house before I like knew how to own a house, and this is years ago. I didn't know how to set up the sprinklers or whatever, and my lawn died. And on Google Maps, you could see a big brown lawn. And I was like, that's invasive. That's in my backyard. It's fenced in. That's private. Mm-hmm. But it's useful enough that we've gotten past our initial shock and horror at the fact that there is a tech company that has photographed every road on the planet.
Wow.
Right?
I mean, to read The Circle. The Circle is a kind of a cool novel if you in your spare time, because I know you have so much of it. So
when I'm not sleeping 14 and a half hours. Yeah. So anyway, there's a I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's funny when since I'm an old person, I'm a huge fan of NCIS, and when they basically any crime is committed anywhere, you can usually find a camera that has caught it on camera.
Right.
Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And that's just funny. Like 1984. Everybody was watched all the time.
Yeah, and that's only going to get more and more and more. You know, I mean, if you think about it, like Amazon, Google, Facebook, I can think of at least those three are all either currently selling or actively working on um, trying to get some sort of augmented vision system where you put a pair of glasses on or whatever, and it looks at things and tells you information, right? But journalists have gone undercover, into the I don't know what you'd call them, but the factories, the data farms or whatever, where people are listening to what Alexa is hearing and telling Alexa, or telling the software, the AI, the algorithm, whether or not it's interpreting that correctly. They were hearing, this journalist did this for a month or more or whatever, and heard passwords, heard intimate conversations, I was just listening.
Oh gosh.
Right. I mean, when Xbox and Xbox and PlayStation came out with like the camera that looked at you and like tracked your body movements and stuff, people freaked out. Out. Like, I'm not putting that in my home. And now we're used to it. Now we're like actively coming into it. It's this cycle that's described by Zuboff in the Surveillance Capitalism book that she wrote. That
I'm unfamiliar with it, but
it is nonfiction, so it's true, but it is more horrifying than any dystopian novel you've ever read. It's just a history. It's a history of the tech companies, from Google to Facebook to now, and what they've done. But anyway, there's a cycle. There's a cycle that they use where they introduce something, it shocks everyone, they pull it back, and then they introduce it in a different way. Several years later, it's weird, and then it becomes normalized, and then it becomes needed, and then it becomes the argument that they're trying to make is that it's inevitable. Is that progress in tech is inevitable. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't fight it. It's going to happen whether you get on board with it or not. And if something is perceived as inevitable, there's no point in resisting it. And so there's this narrative that comes from Silicon Valley that this is inevitable. It is inevitable that we photograph everything. It's inevitable that we track your biometric data. It's inevitable that all of this stuff is happening, that technology will roll on with or without you. And so you might as well get with it. That message of inevitability is actually one of the most sinister things to come out of Silicon Valley is that we have bought into the idea that there's nothing that we can do to stop basically the loss of all human life on Earth. I mean, that's where we're headed is just being fuel for the machines.
This is a fun conversation, man. It's just
all right. I know you tell me I had a hard week, and I'm like, oh yeah, let me make you terrified about your future. Let's see if I can just ruin your weekend too.
Yeah.
No, but I think there's hope. I think there's hope because of artists.
That's true.
Sorry, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I don't remember. We're going to go get a Christmas tree tomorrow. Should we bother? This is like,
I have faith, and I have hope, and I have actions. You know what I mean? I believe in the resiliency of the human spirit. I believe.
So do I. I do.
Believe that humankind, as horrible as we are, and as collectively evil as we are at times, we trend towards good. We trend towards empathy. We trend towards there's something in each of us that pushes for justice and mercy and right, and otherwise we would have destroyed ourselves
a long time ago. I agree with that too. And
I believe that whatever you believe that is, and I have certain beliefs of what I think it is, but whatever you believe that intrinsic drive is, I believe that will overcome our current problems or curtail them in a way that they become helpful and useful. I think tech is useful. I like tech, I'm surrounded by it and everything, but I just think I think people should be aware, and they've done studies that when people are made aware of the data that's being gathered that they don't like it. And that's it's the secrecy, it's the sinister nature, and it's the lies that tell us that there's nothing that we can do about it. I refuse to believe that I don't have agency, that I don't have the will to change and act things. I refuse to believe that individuals do not have an impact on society. I refuse to believe it. And as soon as somebody gives into that belief that I can't do anything, my vote doesn't matter, my art doesn't change anything, then they've become complicit with the destruction of humanity.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And yeah, I am afraid, but I am not without hope. I'm really not without hope. And I see, I actually think that's one of the, and I keep going back to movies, and I keep going back to sci-fi or fantasy type movies. I think that's one of the reasons that Star Trek has such a following, because it gives people hope for the future.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons I have to go watch the movie Tomorrowland again, because Tomorrowland basically talks about how the world is, we're destroying ourselves, and I've talked about this before. We're destroying ourselves, and there's nothing we can do about it. And I don't want to spoil anything, but it in a lot of ways, it's the artists that are going to, and the creatives who are going to, and what they call the dreamers, who are going to make it possible for it not to happen, for us not to destroy ourselves. And I don't want to say anything else for anyone who hasn't seen the movie, because it's a Disney feel-good movie, but it's just a really good movie. Everybody should go out and see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Besides, it's got George Clooney, and what could be? How bad can it be?
Well, that's awesome.
And Hugh Laurie. So how bad can it be?
Oh, I didn't know Hugh Laurie is in it. I like.
Oh
Hugh
yeah,
Laurie.
I do too.
That's awesome.
And,
well, Kathy, where can we find your stuff if we brighten our day and have some awesome animals in our life?
Look at the animals, yes. PendragonArtStudios.com or KathyMooreWilson.com. I've got that Linktree thing going on, and I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and PendragonArtStudios.com is my website, and that's about it.
Cool.
I mean, any of those places.
And you can find me at CoreyKerr.com. And if you want to find all of the things where I am and all of the places where I be, then you can go to CoreyKerr.com/online. And that'll have videos and writings and animations and illustrations and all the stuff.
Yes.
And Instagram and all that. So yeah, thanks for dropping in. Good chat today. Have a good weekend. Things get better. As doom and gloom and as I am, I think it'll get better.
Yes. All right.
See ya.